Less than a week from primary day, the money spent in the governor's race, the congressional races to watch, the role of female candidates, voter turnout, and so much more. Everything you need to know before Tuesday's vote, so stay put. MiWeek is coming up.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Hi there, welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining me. It is all about the politics this week. We have your last minute analysis of all things Michigan primary, so when you vote on Tuesday, you'll have all the info that you need. And we're going to get that from our roundtable today. We'll debate the biggest issues that are influencing voters, plus the impact of women on the ballot and the polls. We'll take a look at what races are toss-ups and the last minute strategies from both parties. So let's get to it with our roundtable this week. You know our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley, he's the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and of course, Stephen Henderson of WDET and American Black Journal. Guys, it's always good to see you. And welcome back to the show, Dave Dulio. He is the chair of the Poli-Sci department at Oakland University, author of 9 books, Dave. I was impressed when I saw that in your bio. And his specialty is in campaigns and elections. It's good to have you back on the show, Dave. Nice to be back, thanks. And Sheila Cockrell, former Detroit City Councilwoman and founder of Citizen Detroit, which is working to increase civic participation and engagement in the city by getting voters informed. Sheila, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you. All right, I think we have the right people in place for this conversation today. But Sheila, I'm going to start with you. Give us an idea of kind of some of the candidates you've brought through with Citizen Detroit and people that you're getting in to be able to understand what they're voting for.
My sense is there's a level of interest and sense of wanting to be engaged that's much higher than I've seen in many years. Actually, the time it feels the most close to was the beginning of the movements in the late 60s and early 70s, the nascent period of people sort of figuring out personal action was really an important next step. We did a state representative speed dating forum. We had 41 candidates show up for the 10 districts that represent part of Detroit. It's really amazing.
You know, I've never seen this. I do candidate questionnaires for our endorsement process. Have never seen so many candidates for legislative races than this year. Every single race has multiple candidates. That's unusual.
So we're seeing a lot of candidates. We're also hearing now that a lot of absentee ballots have gone out more than last time. And we're also looking at the amount of money, Dave, that's being spent in this primary election. Even taking a look at the governor's race, they're spent more than they spent before. How would you kind of assess where we are in this midterm election, and is this a different primary than we've seen before?
For the reasons that were just mentioned, it is a little different than in previous years. I don't think that the amount of money that's spent makes it all that different. We've, for decades, seen an increase in the amount of money spent each election cycle. The data about the number of absentee ballots that have been requested, the increase in absentee ballots that were requested and returned, I think is interesting. Part of it is just an uptick in the number of registered voters overall, but I think it does speak to the enthusiasm and excitement that's out there among at least a portion of the electorate going into campaign season.
Stephen, how would you characterize what we're looking at?
So, you know, I had a conversation about this the other day, and I sort of came to the space where we were wondering about Trump's effect on people's interest in politics and in running for office. And maybe this is an upside to the chaos that he's introduced into the sort of political dialogue. But it does seem like people are more engaged. They're more interested in learning about candidates and knowing what they're voting for, and more people seem to be interested in trying their hand at governance. And there aren't going to be a lot of things, I think, in 10 or 15 years that we look back and say, oh, this was a good thing that Donald Trump did. But this may be a beneficial effect of some of the uncertainty he has injected into the
And that, I
process.
think, goes along the lines of something that you've said, Nolan, in the past couple of weeks, that this is going to be really a referendum on where people stand on Trump in this midterm election.
Oh, I think clearly the congressional races are. You see every single Democratic candidate advertising saying, I'm going to go to Washington and fight Trump, and you have obviously the Republican candidates all trying to get close to Trump. In the Steve Mitchell poll that came out today or yesterday, you got 90% of Republicans saying they approve of Donald Trump, 80% saying they strongly approve. Candidates on the Republican side running very close to him, candidates on the Democratic side running away. Another factor we've got this year is there were so many empty legislative seats because of term limits. I think it's the most open seats we've ever had, and it's particularly true in Metro Detroit.
Yeah.
A lot of term limits.
And that could really change the dynamic of what we're looking at then in the next 2 years, Sheila.
Absolutely, yeah. There's the majority of the House of Representatives are going to be brand new people, and that has all kinds of implications. And you saw it in the in our candidate forum, the range of people who are really, you can tell we're really ready to actually participate in governing, and folks that were like, this just is something I'm running for. So there's a real, the state legislature is going to be interesting.
All four state senators in Macomb County will be new.
Right.
So no institutional memory there.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look. I want to be able to tick down a couple of races here, and I want to start with the governor's race. And I think we've got really interesting storylines on both the Democratic side and the Republican side. I'm going to start with the Democrats. And I want to take a look at maybe some of the messaging that's happening here with the party. You have Gretchen Whitmer, who seems to have brought herself to the middle moderate of Democrats. And you have Abdul Al-Sayed, who's really making a lot of noise in the progressive angle. Bernie Sanders coming in this weekend. My question is, do the Democrats, if their candidate doesn't win, and you have a very rabid base for Abdul Al-Sayed really pushing and believing in what his message is, do they show up then in November should their candidate not win this time around? I'm going to let you take a start on that.
Well, that was what we saw with, Hillary Clinton having a real problem closing the deal with Bernie voters. Most of them, or a lot of them at least, sat out. I think the opposite is more likely to happen this time for a couple of reasons. Abdul, even though he is running very hard against Gretchen Whitmer to try to get the nomination, there's more, I guess, relationship there between the two campaigns. I think everyone understands that after the primary, it's time to focus on the Republican. I also want to just throw this out there as a possibility. I think you could end up seeing Abdul as the LG candidate for Gretchen Whitmer, which would, of course, close the deal with those progressive voters, give the Democrats a great storyline, the first Muslim American to be able to maybe join the state house. Does it help her in Detroit,
though? I mean,
it may help her in Detroit, where she's had issues.
But does it?
I think it might. I mean, it's not as good as a black candidate from Detroit might be, but you don't have a whole lot of obvious choices for that, people who would be available to do that. So I think that's something that we could see happen if Gretchen wins.
Dave, let me ask you too, also looking at the candidacy of Sri Tanandar, the amount of money that he's infused in his own campaign, what has kind of struck you in taking a look at that?
Well, I think the amount of money that he did kick in is very notable. He has done, I think, a really good job of building his name recognition, something that any candidate that's running statewide who's new to the process is going to have to do. I think more and more people know who he is. I think his biggest issue is the candidacy of Al-Sayed. They both seem to be trying to carve out that progressive wing and get the votes from the progressive side of the party. And that really, I think, favors Gretchen Whitmer. Right? If the progressives are split and Sri is even siphoning off a few votes from Abdul, then that makes it much easier for Gretchen Whitmer.
Sheila?
Yeah, very interesting in terms of our work with folks. The person we hear the most questions about is Sri Tanandar. What do you think about him? And part of it is his commercials. They are funny. They're interesting.
They're relentless.
Yeah,
and
they are
two
relentless.
ran back to back last night when I was watching television.
And what he's doing on the ground. I mean, at my house, I must have gotten, I don't know, 20 pieces of literature.
That's true as well,
him.
from the mail.
And then it's now getting to be the war of the size. Now Gretchen came out with this like huge thing that's delivered to each house, and then Shree has 2 or 3 kind of mid-size. Like, we're not talking 8.5 by 11. We're talking, you know, it's like-
Posters.
But think about that, $7 million in what most people would think was a chaotic quest
Yes.
out of his own pocket. Sandy Pinsler, $5 million out of his own pocket. Jim Hines, you know, surging a little bit in the polls from 0 to about 5 or 6.
About $4
on
million
the
from his own
strength
pocket?
of $4 million. Why? I mean, nobody would think that the bets are even good, that any of them will be in office in November. Why spend that much of your own money?
Dave?
Well, they might be trying to catch lightning in a bottle, right? I mean, that's we've seen the and let's not overstate it, right? The new folks coming into the process running as outsiders, and for decades people have run for Congress by running against Washington. But there does seem to be something different about it this time, maybe more folks injecting themselves, trying to capitalize on the success of Trump, where he was able to run as an outsider. And maybe folks are trying to say, now here's my chances.
But the difference there is that Donald Trump didn't spend hardly any money, right? I mean, that was about this
he had
very
Well, he's been building his
visceral
name
appeal.
recognition
Well, that's
since
right.
the 80s.
Yeah,
I mean, he
right.
didn't
I mean,
have to
But
pay
still,
for that.
it was incredible to
Not
think
sure
how
that
little he spent.
Right, I'm
to
not
win
sure
the
that money is the
presidency.
key to all of that. And I also always worry about people who want it so badly that they're willing to spend that kind of money. They get there often and are really disappointed at how little the
they can
job
do.
looks like what they thought.
how
Dave
little you
Trott-
can do.
how we
Dave
can
Trott's
actually
a
do,
perfect
right.
example.
Dave Trott is
Yeah.
a really great example.
All right, well,
of
let's
that.
go ahead and take a look at the Republicans. We've had a lot of back and forth. And Nolan, I'm going to start with you for a little bit of perspective between Brian Calley and Bill Schuette. Getting a little nasty now, taking a look at some, well, I was trying to be kind. Taking a look at emails, and was it on personal time? Was it on government time? Did he break the law? There seems to be still a very large gap, though, if you believe the polling. And that's another question that we can debate, quite honestly.
The Mitchell poll says 22 points. I don't know where it stands.
But no poll is under like 15.
No, well, the internal polls show it closer, but they always do. So, you know, but the viciousness of this campaign is what has struck me. Steve spoke about the Democrats coming together and the sense that they will unite, perhaps even put one of the opponents on the ticket. That's not going to happen on the Republican side. They will not come together. I can't see that. They've done all of the Democrats' opposition research for them. It's going to be hard for them now to go into November. The Democratic candidate, Gretchen Whitmer or whomever it is going to have an arsenal provided to her by Republicans.
Sheila.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that the tension between the two of them, I think, is reflective of the tension inside the Republican Party. I think there's the impact of the Flint water crisis on the reputation, the face of that party is really huge, and that it's really affected how people inside are how they're going to create their own new identity.
What do you think, Dave?
I think that it's Schuette's race to lose. I think that Calley, his campaign suffered right from the beginning with the pretty
That
crazy
weird,
the part-time legislature proposal.
So he
or
should have
idea.
launched then, as opposed to waiting. If that's what you're saying.
And that ad he's done in Detroit, the one, at least the one I've seen in Detroit, that's sort of like Detroit was this like wasteland until Governor Snyder and he put all the lights back on. It's offensive
It's
on
really
its
bad.
face.
The messaging isn't.
messaging.
quite
And who is he
there.
trying to appeal to with that narrative?
Well,
No
I
one in
mean,
Detroit is voting in that.
Nobody's going to vote for him anyway.
Yeah,
So you can
so-
say what you want about Detroit. If you're a Republican gubernatorial candidate, I think, what did Snyder top out at? 10, 12%?
10 to 12, I think it
You know,
Right.
and he's a guy who pumped tons
Well, I don't
of
even
energy
see why
and money
talking
into
about
the
Detroit
city.
would help him with the base that he is looking
Right,
for.
in the suburbs, I don't think they care about that.
Right.
I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens then. I think what you're talking about, the going forward and seeing in September where the Republican Party goes from there. And let's say that Bill Schuette does get the nomination. I always kind of wonder what's next for Brian Calley then. Is that something that he goes private sector and works for a couple of years and then he makes the entree back into political life?
If he chooses to. I mean, it took him a long time to decide he actually wanted to do this anyway. So his heart wasn't in it at the beginning. But both of these parties have a huge pivot to make in November because the middle is not where the vast number of voters aren't where either of these campaigns are. Schuette's going to have to decide, if he's the nominee, whether he's going to keep his arms that tightly around Trump, and Whitmer's going to have to decide if she's going to chase the socialist wing of the party still, because that has not much appeal to independents and to moderate Republicans and Democrats. Nobody's talking to them in this primary season.
All right, let's go ahead and shift gears and take a look at some of the congressional races. And I think that the 13th Congressional District, which has replaced John Conyers, who stepped down, resigned last year. And you've got a long list of people. I'm going to read them off so we'll make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Brenda Jones, who's the City Council President. Rashida Tlaib, who was endorsed by the Free Press and has raised the most money so far. Ian Conyers, who is endorsed by the Detroit News. Bill Wild, who's the mayor of Westland. Coleman Young Jr., and Chanel Jackson. I think it's a very interesting also because people have to decide who is going to fill in the interim until January and then who is going to take over for the next 2 years. Stephen, let me start with you on this one. And when you look at a field like that, who stands out to you and who do you think has the edge?
Well, I think the race is really about the future of representation in that district as it pertains to city versus suburb. Bill Wild is the only powerful sort of suburban figure in that field.
And let's just say that's Dearborn Heights, Detroit, Westland, and Redford.
And Redford, he's the mayor of Westland. It's about 35% of that district is outside of the city of Detroit, and a lot of the people who live in those areas have felt for a long time like they weren't terribly well represented or as well represented as folks from Detroit. And so there may be a real attraction to the idea of Bill Wild. If he can pull 28, 30, 31% of the vote, he could win because you have so many people in the city who have decided that they want it as well. I don't know that that will happen. I think if on the city side it does, if it does go that way, Brenda Jones probably has the best chance because she's somebody who runs citywide every 4 years and gets a lot of votes and people know her. But some of those other candidates are pretty formidable too. I wouldn't count people out. Rashida Tlaib has made a real push in the last couple of weeks.
And she's raised over $1 million. Sheila, let me ask you, when people are talking about this race, what are the most important issues to them in deciding who the next representative from this district is going to be?
Well, one of the things we saw in our events was for a lot of people in Detroit, people understanding very clearly that this person represented the suburbs too, which for a number of folks really hadn't registered that this was like there really was this wider group. The issues that people are really concerned about healthcare, are concerned about job creation. These are the kinds of issues that people were really talking about a great deal. And we did a candidate forum, and the Republican candidate came. He's a write-in, but he was there. And then, I guess all of them, all the candidates showed up. And it was the way we do it is people go table to table, so they're talking directly with the candidate. And in that sort of the people who seemed, Ian Conyers really resonated with a lot of folks, seeing him as sort of the next younger generation. Brenda Jones has a really large following, but people were really interested in the fact that this was city and suburb alike.
Let me take a little big picture kind of look at this, Dave. And what is the importance of this seat that had been held by John Conyers for so long and losing that kind of legislative clout in Washington, and how this next person is going to have to come in and sort of deal with building up that representation of saying, okay, we're going to be fighting for Detroit on that national level?
Well, it's unfortunately for Michigan, losing such a giant of the House of Representatives like John Conyers was, forget about why he left, but just the fact that he is now gone damages Michigan. And we've seen that over the years by losing well-respected, powerful members of the House, committee chairmen that have since left. That damages the state because, as you all know, if you're a chair of a committee, you got a lot of power. And I think that it would be a mistake for whoever wins that seat to try and replicate what John Conyers was or did. They're going to have to carve out their own style, their own personality, and their own representative work for that district.
What's ahead for that person, Nolan, and who do you think has the best grasp of that job?
Well, I don't know who has the best grasp of the job. I think, the challenge for whoever wins is in these first 2 years is to establish themselves as someone who is not going to be challenged the next time around, because you've got 6 people in this race. If somebody just ekes by, say it's Bill Wild out of the suburbs, he's going to face probably 4 or 5 strong challengers again. That first term after you win the first time, people still think you're vulnerable and they make a good solid run. Look at Mike Bishop's 2 terms in now, and he's still getting a strong challenge. So their goal is to establish themselves to the point where nobody wants to take them on.
Yeah, I think after the primary, we're going to have to talk about the 8th and what Mike Bishop might be doing, sweating it out a little bit up there. There is going to be a debate of the 13th Congressional District candidates on Channel 4 this week, so I will plug their debate. So go ahead and watch that and be informed. Before we get to taking a look at the 11th Congressional District, which has really become a skirmish for Republicans, I want to talk a little bit about the role of women in the election this year. We're seeing more female candidates. We are seeing more women donating to campaigns. We are seeing women saying that more of them that are going to vote. And I'm going to start with you, Sheila, and ask you what you're seeing and hearing from people and why you believe. And again, we can start about women who have felt galvanized by what has happened in Washington and with Trump when women showed up en masse in January, right after he was inaugurated, and where it's kind of taken us from here.
Well, my sense is, and this is city and suburb alike, that there's an interest in political leadership by women that is materially different than in the past. Women, one, believing that we must act, that women's rights, if you will, or women's position in American society is potentially about to shift. I mean, the election of a person for president with the kind of personal history that the man had, and know that majority of white women voted for him, is a really interesting challenge to everyone. So I've literally talked to women for whom it's their first time they've ever gone to a political meeting, that they've ever put a lawn sign in their lawns. This is primarily in the suburbs. There's a galvanization of women leadership and women wanting to stand up that's new and different.
Dave, what are the challenges, would you say, that women who are running for office face?
The challenges that any candidate faces, right? I mean, but let's be clear, right? We've seen something similar, maybe not exactly, but 1992 was dubbed the Year of the Woman, and this has 2018 has the potential to be the Year of the Woman 2.0.
Right, because just a quick stat here, that there are 476 more women running for the House since '92. That was 298 in 1992.
Right, so it's a almost doubling of that number. It is what the empirical evidence shows is that women, once they decide to run and are actively campaigning, they win about the same amount as men. It is the hurdle for women has seemed to be in the past making the decision to throw your hat in the ring, right? And that is something that is, again, different with almost 500 women running. That's a palpable difference.
All right, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to get to the 11th Congressional District. And Nolan, I'm going to start with you. Speaking of women, there are a couple of women Democrats who are running also, and Lena Epstein on the Republican side seems to be leading the charge here. Rocky Ruskowski, Mike Kowal, Clint Kesto, Carrie Benevolio. The Republicans are duking it out, and some people are calling this as a toss-up when we look at November.
Well, it very well could, because the demographics of that district have changed over the decade. It was a safe seat when Trott was sitting in it. I don't know that it's a safe seat now that it's open. Mitchell poll, again, going back to that, Epstein has opened about an 8-point lead, largely on the strength of the national attention she got and the money she got from being denied her fundraiser at the Franklin Hills Country Club. That was the best thing that club could have done for her. They said, well, you're Republican, you're for Trump, you can't come here. And she got money in from all over the country. This is going to be an interesting race depending on who comes out of it. On the Democratic side, you've got the 2 leading candidates, I believe, or 3 leading candidates, Tim Grimal,
Sunil Gupta, Haley Stevens, and Faye Saad.
You know, Grimal, of that 3, Grimal's the only one with a resume. The other 2 haven't done very much. If it's Grimal versus Epstein, I think it becomes a very, very interesting race.
And going back to gender, right? We're usually seeing women run on the Democratic side. Here, you'd have a Republican woman, and how that dynamic works would be really fascinating.
It'd be really interesting.
In 30 seconds left, how are we feeling about polls these days? When you hear, we've got poll numbers, then I thought I saw a poll with a margin of error of like 8%. I was like, I don't know if you
it's
should.
still, when it's done right, the most accurate way to get the sense of what voters are going to do.
I know, but you just said
But we
asterisk when it's done right.
But we have a lot of people out there doing sloppy work, and it's hurting those who are really dutiful about the way they.
A poll is only as good as its sample.
Yeah, that's
if
right.
the sample mirrors if we're talking about elections, if it mirrors what turnout is on elections day, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
If they miss the sample, then it's all bets are off.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Dave Giulia from OU, thanks so much for joining us. Sheila Cockrell from Citizen Detroit. We'll go ahead and check your work out there so people can get involved and
Absolutely.
get involved in the process. We appreciate it. Of course, Stephen Nolan, I'm going to see you guys next week. That's going to do us. Thanks for joining us. Check out MiWeek.org for the stories that we're working on and the shows that you might have missed. Vote on Tuesday. Come back next Thursday for more My Week. I'm Christy McDonald, and for all of us at Detroit Public TV, we will see you next time. Take care.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.